Should social media be regulated, Google is getting very good at promoting its next Pixel phones and a little bit about Apple's earnings report. All that and more coming up next on Tech News Weekly.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Tech News Weekly, episode 93, recorded Thursday, August 1st, 2019. This episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by LastPass, the #1 most preferred password manager. Just remember your master password, and LastPass remembers the rest. Visit lastpass.com/twit, and you can learn more.
Hello and welcome to Tech News Weekly, the show where every week we talk to and about the people making and breaking the tech news. I'm Mikah Sargent.
I'm Jason Howell. It's good to have you here, Mikah.
I am excited to be here. This feels good. You know, there's no weird camera tilt because we're both the same height.
Yes, I know, right?
With Leo.
Well, and we were talking about this in the pre-show. You're familiar with this set because of iOS today. It's just now you're in shorter chairs. So is that going to be okay for you?
Well, is there a crank or something? No, I'm kidding. I'm fine. This feels great.
A hydraulic system. We got to work on a hydraulic system. Okay. Awesome to have you here. Thank you for hopping on TNW and being the co-host.
Yeah.
It's great to have you.
This is fun.
Let's do it. Let's jump into our first interview. It must be really stressful running a successful social media company right now. Drama followed by scandal, followed by the term regulation again and again. Some are focusing on the antitrust implications of these tech behemoths, and others, like Senator Josh Howell, are focused on the public health burden of social media. And joining us to make sense of the, and this is a mouthful, Social Media Addiction Reduction Technology Act is Emily Birnbaum, writer for The Hill. Welcome to the show, Emily.
Thank you so much for having me.
You bet. It's great to get you on. So before we dive into the specifics of the bill, who is Senator Josh Howell in the scope of this story? What is his background in Congress as it relates to the business of big tech?
So he is a freshman senator from Missouri. He's the youngest senator. I think he's 39. And he was the Attorney General of Missouri before coming into the Senate. And as Attorney General, he had a couple of actions against big tech. So he prompted this antitrust probe into Google. And he's brought this antagonistic attitude towards tech into Congress. And he's kind of tried really hard to make a name for himself as the strongest critic of big tech among the Republicans. So there are a number of Democratic senators who have been speaking out against Facebook, Twitter, YouTube for a long time, but he has brought that criticism more prominently to the Republican side of the aisle.
And then, of course, I rattled off the name of this act. It's easier to just call it SMART, the SMART Act. What does it call for exactly? What's going on inside this?
So it specifically outlaws a couple of features that he says are designed solely to keep users addicted. So that would include autoplay, YouTube's autoplay, infinite scroll. So when you're on Twitter, it just keeps going and going. When you're on Facebook, it keeps going and going. And also something that sounds and looks an awful lot like Snapchat's Snap Streak. And then it also requires these companies to build, quote unquote, user-friendly interfaces. So they would require the companies to build in these timers so that it tells you when you've been on for 30 minutes. It allows you to totally dictate when you're going to get kicked off the platform, and a couple of other changes to the product that are similar to that.
I want to go back to what you said about the Snapchat streaks, the Twitter and Facebook. I mean, Twitter and Facebook are kind of, their whole point is the endless stream. And with Snapchat, I know people are not, like my younger siblings are obsessed with their streaks. There's even an article or several articles online that show you how to contact Snapchat to get your streak back. So my question for you is kind of about that. Like, do we think that this bill here who is this for? Because is it for the person who uses Snapchat to communicate with their friends and wants to maintain their streak? You think this is going to end up upsetting those people? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's already upset people. I think people have responded to this bill by saying it seems really extreme. It's kind of doesn't happen very often that Congress will weigh in and tell social media companies how to build their products. And it's interesting you mentioned young users, because I know that Senator Hawley has relatively young children. And I think that he has learned and witnessed the power of the snap streak firsthand. And it obviously, I mean, like children, or younger people they're not even saying anything when they send Snapchats back and forth. They just want to keep the streak alive.
Yeah, I think the big question that I have around this is like, what exactly qualifies addictive behavior, or something that caters to, air quotes, addictive behavior? Is this something that do we know details at this point as far as how broadly or defined or how specific it is, and how it applies maybe even to behaviors in apps and services that haven't been created yet? Like, how does the term addictive get applied to these features?
Yeah, so I think they address that question in the text of the bill. So they lay out these specific things that I've named: autoplay, infinite scroll, the snap streak. But then they say every 3 years, the Department of Health and Human Services and the Federal Trade Commission will be revisiting the question. So they're going to be able to rewrite the rules to adapt as technology adapts. So to be able to stay in line with the technology, create new rules that would limit any new addictive features that come out.
Some of these features, I would say, are pretty similar to what you see in casinos, and how keeping people locked into a casino so that they continue to place bets and keep gambling. Is there any rationale about how one application of this is okay and another application of it is not? It's perfectly legal for casinos to employ these tactics, but for social media companies, it's not. And why the line?
I think the idea is that the stakes are a little higher when it comes to social media, just because of there are far more people on social media every single day than there are people going physically to casinos every single day. Right. So I think the idea is, I probably, if you ask Senator Josh Hawley, I don't know if he'd be really excited about all of the tactics casinos employ, but I think it would be treated differently because we all have social media.
Interesting. Then I think of coffee shops. We're going to those addictive places, and I imagine Holly has some coffee in the morning. But my question for you, how do the SMART Act's sort of rules compare to what companies are already doing? So think of Instagram and its feature to sort of get you to log off after a while, or built-in features like Google and Apple offer with their operating systems.
Well, first, it would require them to tweak their products to offer that without you even asking to some extent. And I think it would build these products in more prominently, and it would require a lot of engineering so that the products are specifically geared towards mitigating some of these quote unquote addictive qualities. So I think it would just ask them to go a lot further, and they would also, bring the power of the law to enforce that.
Right. He's also made comments that Americans might actually be better off without social media entirely, which I don't know if that's just like a throwaway statement, like, oh, and by the way, this is just how I feel, or whether that's a sign of things to come. Where do you think he stands on that? It'd be hard to get rid of social media, let's be honest.
It's definitely how he feels, but I don't think he has any intention of trying to ban Facebook, ban Twitter. I think what he wants is much stricter regulation of these platforms. And then also, there are people there's Elizabeth Warren, and there's a lot of 2020 candidates who are saying, let's break up the big tech companies. He actually doesn't say that and doesn't agree with that, thinks it goes too far. He thinks there should just be really strict rules of the road. He says if we were to break up the tech companies, it would probably just create a lot of new tech companies with the same issues that he's identified. He just wants them to reorient their missions, I think is the best way to put it.
Yeah. That makes sense. And then, of course, there's the tech companies. Poor tech companies. We haven't heard from them. Are they saying anything in response to this? You know, YouTube, Twitter, Snapchat, Facebook. Are they responding?
Yeah, the poor tech companies. I like that. So I haven't gotten any comments on the record from these companies, but they oftentimes, you know, in Washington, when it comes to this kind of legislation, they speak through their trade groups. So the Internet Association, which represents most of the companies that would be touched by this legislation, have come out with a statement saying, first, that it's not backed by compelling evidence. So they say they back this legislation that's moving through Congress that would just require more research on how people get addicted to technology, how children interact with technology, things like that. They say we support that, but this doesn't seem to have that much science behind it. And then I think they also say it would just, it would involve so much engineering. It could potentially affect some of the smaller social media companies in a really negative way. It could affect their ability to retain users. They say it would just make for a bad user experience as part of it as well.
Speaking of that bad user experience, you know, you mentioned this, it'd be harder for smaller companies. In your article, you said that these changes would kind of have to be made within a few months. That's not typically how, I mean, Twitter is notorious for this. They say, oh, we're working on a change, and then it's like 6 years later, they finally have the change out. Do you think that is where we kind of will see some pushback from these social media companies more so than anywhere else? Is kind of, if they can't make the argument that their products are addictive, then can they make the argument that they need time to make these changes if they have to take place?
Yeah, I think that they could easily make that argument, but I think that kind of assumes that the legislation would move forward and they would have to really bring a lot of resources and energy into the debate. And as of right now, I don't know if they feel that kind of impetus. So, of course, they would have to bring up questions about the amount of effort it would take to create basically a totally new way of interacting with their platform. But I don't know if they're so concerned about it right now.
Yeah. No sponsors currently. So a lot would have to change in order for that to happen. Emily, really appreciate you writing about this, coming on the show to talk about it as well. Emily Birnbaum with The Hill. Where can people follow you online? Do you have a Twitter ID?
I do. My Twitter is Birnbaum _E
right
at twitter.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Appreciate your time. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thanks so much for having me on.
We'll talk to you soon. Too. All right, coming up, Google is all about letting you know, well, basically everything about its Pixel 4 phone months ahead of the release. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by LastPass. I love LastPass. Use it every single day. It's literally like my keys to the web. LastPass is an award-winning security solution that helps millions of individuals and thousands of businesses navigate their online lives easily and securely. You know LastPass as the #1 most preferred password manager, of course, at home and at work. Did you know, though, that LastPass just recently expanded their solutions for businesses? LastPass has a brand new business lineup with fantastic new features that'll improve security across your company while also making it easy for users to get to their work. LastPass Enterprise, the business password manager, now includes single sign-on for 1,200 plus SAML integrated apps, each with its own getting started guide, so it's simple to get up and running with SSO. LastPass MFA is an adaptive MFA solution that leverages your biometrics, things you have on you, like your face and your fingerprint, as well as contextual factors like your location or your IP address to know that you are who you say you are, all on a simple to manage dashboard for admins to have oversight and control. And then LastPass Identity is a combination of LPE and LPMFA, from single sign-on and password management to adaptive authentication. LastPass actually gives granular control to IT and frictionless access to users, all in one simple, secure solution. Now, we use LastPass Enterprise here at Twit. We love it. We're excited about these new products. Like I said, I literally use it every single day. I've got it locked down with two-factor authentication. All my passwords are there. And when I sign up for new sites, I know I'm creating the most secure password because LastPass is doing it for me, and they're all different. So I I can't stress enough how much I love this company and the business and what they do for me and protecting me. That's what it's all about. LastPass is bridging the gap between passwords and identity by making access and authentication simple and secure for both IT and end users. Join the thousands of businesses who've signed up for LastPass and are loving and trusting it, just like we do here at Twit. Visit lastpass.com/twit, and you can find out how they can help you. That's lastpass.com/twit. Google keeps grabbing the headlines by teasing out features of its next premium phone that's, by all accounts, still months away from an official unveiling. Is that a sound plan? It seems to be working so far. Joining us to discuss Google's new promotional strategy is Andrew Martonik from Android Central. Welcome back to the show, Andrew.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. It's good to see you again. So we've got a few directions that we can go in this, and I thought first we could start here. We already saw Google do this before with the promotional strategy of kind of, coming out with information soon after leaks. Once again, there were leaks about some Soli radar technology making its way into the Pixel 4 earlier, like this week or late last week, and then Google just went and confirmed it all in detail. How do you think this strategy is working for Google? Why are they doing things so differently now?
It's kind of seems just like Google doesn't have anything to lose at this point. I mean, we've talked for years and years about Pixel sales not being that great, and they really only seem to have traction with the less expensive 3A and 3A XL, which are great phones in their own right. But I think they realize that they don't really have a whole lot of sales to give up on. They'll Sherlock effect of announcing something early and killing sales of your current markets on or products on the market. They don't really have that problem because very few people are buying the Pixel 3 and 3 XL anyway. So they might as well get the hype train rolling. It seems to be working, at least with the big enthusiast crowd anyway.
Yeah. Do you I don't know where I'm going with this because I think I know the answer, but I like to think it's the other way anyways. Do you see this as a strategy as something that Google just came up with on the fly? They were like, dang it, here come all these leaks. Do you think we should just go ahead and announce that they're real? Or do you think they've just become really good at rolling with it at this point and that this was all planned to begin with?
Oh, it's really tough.
Hard to say. Yeah.
A lot of these things, more of these things are planned and thought about internally than we want to realize, or maybe we, the general consumer at least would understand. There is a lot of planning that goes into these things. The marketing and advertising people at Google are very, very smart, and it's a very, very large group. I do think that there's some of it is just kind of seat of the pants, though. There's no way to fully plan these things out. You can just try to kind of ride the wave, when it does happen.
Yeah, and take the pulse of the response, which I would say The pulse of the response has been pretty darn good. I feel like everybody's really been praising Google. And part of that is the strategy. Part of it also are the features, right? Like Project Soli was something that made a splash 3 or 4 years ago at Google I/O, really felt like the future. And yet now we're hearing that it's going to be rolled out for the first time into a Google product, and it's going to end up in the Pixel 4. So talk a little bit about the Soli radar. Do you feel like it's a game changer? Is this going to be a really big step up for smartphones?
It's very interesting because Google announced two things at once. They announced that they're doing this Soli radar thing, and then also integrating that as part of the greater face identification, face unlock on the Pixel 4. So we kind of got the double announcement, and the face unlock part is way more practical and interesting. Obviously, we've all been seen this used in the wild for years and years, most popular in the iPhone 10 series, of course. But Soli itself, oh man, I don't want to get too hyped about it just because I've used other gesture systems like in the LG G8, and we've seen them used in more of like an IoT context and in the home and things like that. They just don't work particularly well. The hope is that Soli, having these really fine, kind of fine motor control tracking will change that. But the concept of having a phone that's just right here in front of you, but you don't touch it, just doesn't, it kind of falls on its face for me.
Hi, Andrew. So you said that kind of the Soli on its own is not exactly exciting. So in other words, it's Soli plus these face unlock features and the hardware that's involved with that makes it more exciting?
Yeah, Soli has to be just part of the experience. Google kind of showed a little cutaway of the top of the Pixel 4 and everything that's involved there. It also includes multiple cameras and IR illuminators, and you can see this tied in with all sorts of other things in the future, not just on the Pixel 4 and what hardware is going to be there, but just having a Soli sensor there doesn't just automatically make the phone amazing and do all these extra things. Mm-hmm. It has to be part of a larger strategy. And like I experienced with the LG G8, their time of flight sensors and their Z depth sensing was really good. It was just the use cases just didn't make a whole lot of sense. So you have to actually put these things to good use, like we've seen in who knows how many products. The technology can be really, really good, but it doesn't necessarily turn into a feature that people want to care about or rely on.
So can I ask you, this is a bit of a put you on the spot, is there a feature that would make you excited about being able to use it up close? Like, what is the thing that makes these kinds of air gestures actually interesting?
Goodness, that's really tough. I mean, the big one, of course, is always, oh, well, my hands are, messy or wet or whatever, or I have, gloves on that won't work with capacitive touchscreens, or the phone's in a car mount, or it's otherwise docked, on a stand-up wireless charger or something like that. You could see those kinds of use cases. I still don't think that any of those things are killer features in the same way that, like I said, the face unlock is, which is something you're going to be using hundreds of times a day. And yes, that's integrated with the Soli sensor for as just the greater set of sensors to tell when you're looking at the phone and where the phone is. That's really cool. But the touchless motion controls, I just don't quite see the killer feature yet. I mean, maybe Google has something up its sleeve that we don't know about yet.
Maybe. I mean, you definitely wrote, and you've alluded to a few times now, about the LG G8 implementation of this kind of air control thing. And I know when I played with the LG G8, it was very hit or miss. Like, it's so much like, in order for this to work, it has to work nearly every time, right? That's always my opinion on these new technologies
Absolutely.
that come into phones. Otherwise, you're just going to use it a couple of times, it's going to fail, and you're going to stop using it and not care about it anymore. And with the G8, you really had to be just perfect to get the control just right. Maybe Soli improves the accuracy of that, but then the greater question is, do people really care about air gestures? I could see it in a car, though. If I'm driving and just be able to go backtrack in the air, and that took it, or on the Google Home, something like that.
From across the room, yeah. Yay.
Right, exactly.
Over
Pick up
here.
the phone,
Yeah.
or whatever.
It really makes a lot more sense. I was just actually watching This Week in Google, and Stacey Higginbotham made a very interesting point that Soli is going to come to more things than just phones.
Yeah.
This is going to be a trial balloon, and the fact that they can get it into this little tiny bit of bezel on a phone is amazing. But you could see this being in a Nest Hub Max type of product, or it's something like that, where it's fixed and where it's going to be, and that kind of narrows the scope of what the sensor has to do in the first place. But it still seems so weird to me that's like, the phone is probably in your non-dominant hand, right, and it's right there, but I'm gonna do something like this. I don't really get what that use case is. When it's just there, and that gets back to your point of it has to work every single time, or you're just gonna reach your thumb over there and just touch the screen anyway.
No, I mean, according to the promotional video, the use for this is that you've mounted your phone to the wall. And
right at eye level.
Yes, at eye level. Because don't we all do that, literally a million times a day?
Exactly.
I'm excited about the face scan solution. I don't know that I'm necessarily excited about the fact that the fingerprint solution seems to be going away. I don't think we're hearing about anything under the display for an in-display fingerprint sensor. Do you think the combination of sensors and everything that Google illustrated, is it looking good that Google might actually have a solid, workable face scan solution?
Yeah, everything that we see in the hardware here, and yes, Soli is part of this in terms of telling, where your face is and where your hand is in relation to the phone and the angle. All of this hardware together looks like this is going to be the best face unlocking system that we've seen. We've seen more advanced ones, and we've seen them from LG and Huawei, in addition to Apple, of course. But the way that Google is doing it with infrared illuminator and things like that is very Apple-like. And this looks like it could be something where you're not going to miss the fingerprint sensor. And of course, there are downsides to each authentication method. But this really seems like it's going to be a considerable, like massive step beyond any of the Face ID type systems we've seen before, even the, quote unquote, advanced ones with time of flight cameras.
Even the very first one that Google rolled out many years ago. That one was fun.
Yes.
And then kind of shifting gears from like a broader perspective here, Google, on its earnings, said that they're having awesome success with their lower end phone, the Pixel 3a. Everybody loves the 3a. I loved it. I used it for quite a while. The Pixel 4 is definitely going to be a premium phone, right? These features, are going to be packed in there. So we're talking upwards of $900, $1,000. I'm guessing, based on what we've seen in the past. Do you think these features justify that higher cost, especially in light of the fact that people seem to be straying a little bit further away from premium smartphones right now?
Yeah, that's really tough. In one way, the fact that the 3A and 3A XL, and presumably they would do the same thing with the 4A and 4A XL later, the fact that they're being well received and they're at these nice $400 to $500 price point actually seems to give Google more ability on the high end to just keep going up. We saw just about every other manufacturer do this. We saw, of course, Samsung do this, releasing 3 Galaxy S10s. The fact that they can have something at the low end lets them just push higher and higher. So I wouldn't be surprised at all to see the 4 and 4XL pushing toward $1,000. Whether or not they're actually justified by things like all of these advanced sensors, it doesn't seem like they're really getting much traction with their current strategy of being kind of low on features and selling simplicity as a feature. So throwing in some new capabilities, sure, that might get initial sales, but it really, for me, needs to come. The value needs to come from, are the cameras still amazing? Did they address a lot of the battery life issues that people have had with Pixels for years? Are the screens truly top notch? They have all of these other things where there are still legitimate shortcomings in the Pixel 3 lineup that, they need to fix those in addition to all of these other cool things like Soli and Face Unlock.
Yeah. Absolutely agree. Andrew Martonik, great to see you again, man. AndroidCentral.com, and where can people follow you personally online?
You can just find me at my name on Twitter. I'm talking about all this kind of stuff and, so much more. But you can read all the official stuff at Android Central.
Right on. Thank you, Andrew. It's good to see you again.
Of course. Thanks.
We'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Well, folks, it is that time again. Apple's quarterly earnings report was published Tuesday, and the company provided more color on its Q3 earnings via phone. Joining us to analyze the analysts and provide more color on the numbers is Lory Gil from iMore. Hello, Lory.
Hi, Mikah. How are you?
I'm doing well. So good to see you. So I would like to start with the big one. Now, despite a record third quarter, we'd be remiss not to point out that iPhone, which is traditionally Apple's biggest earner, accounted for less than half of the company's revenue this time around. So, Lory Gil, is Apple doomed?
It's always doomed. That's the going saying, right? I think this comes in a time. There's a couple of different things. The quarter itself it's always a little slow, so there's always going to be a little dip. I think the market is also saturated with iPhones. Basically, everyone who's going to have a phone has a phone at this point, and they're going to have to start, going to outer space if they want to get new people buying phones. So it's more difficult to get new subscribers, and we're kind of at a point now where you need to be either getting switchers, getting people to switch over from a different platform, or you need to start growing your revenue somewhere outside of the iPhone. So I think across the board, it's not just the iPhone has dropped, but it's that phone sales in general, they're more at a plateau. They're not growing right now. They're just plateauing. I think that's part of why we're also seeing a lot of phone makers coming out with these crazy new things like, 3D cameras and foldable phones and things like that, because they're trying to get us interested in buying a new phone again when we're just kind of okay with the phones we have. Technology has finally met our needs, and we don't need more right now. So it's a little more difficult for these companies, including Apple, to sell new phones to people who already have them.
So speaking of trying to find new ways to kind of make money outside of phones, Lory, you and I know very well what it's like to transcribe an Apple earnings report. And while I was doing it, the word services came up a whole lot. So we continue to see Apple really push into services like Apple TV, Music, iCloud, etc., and opening it up to third-party companies. You know, the TV app is on a bunch of third-party platforms, and we are seeing HomeKit support and AirPlay support also on smart televisions. Do we think that's the way the company's going to continue to go, and will they continue to grow those services?
Absolutely. I think services accounted for 21% of Apple revenue. So that's definitely a growing amount. I think they also said that they have 420 million paid subscribers across their services, which is their goal in 2020 was to hit the 500 million mark. And so they're on track for sure to hit that mark. So they're definitely positioning themselves, which I think, some analysts will say that Apple is doomed because the iPhone is losing steam, and now they're trying to catch up with services. But I would argue that they saw the writing on the wall a while ago, and that's why they started really pushing their services and growing their services, not just with Apple Music and Apple TV, but things like Apple Care. I think they mentioned that they are now having more third-party retailers that have repair programs and things like that. So they're offering Apple Care to a wider variety. They're also doing special programs in some other countries where Apple Care is included with some of the purchases that you make. They're trying to kind of grow all of their services all around because they saw the writing on the wall that iPhones are not going to be as lucrative as they had been in the past. I think, since maybe it was 2009 or something like that the iPhone was more than 50% of their profits. And so this is, it is a big deal that it's dropped. But I also think that they did exactly what they needed to do, which is we see that this isn't working anymore. So let's find something else that we can create revenue for.
And then how tied to the iPhone are those services? I feel like when I've thought about services in the past in relationship with Apple, I thought, well, this is a very symbiotic relationship, right? Like you get an iPhone and then that opens the door and the window for these services. Will a drop in iPhone sales negatively affect the success of services over time? And is there a way for Apple to make sure that doesn't happen?
Well, I think they're already starting to do that right now. That we already know that Apple Music is available outside of the Apple ecosystem. Right. I think you can even use it on Echo devices now and natively. And things like Apple TV, the TV app Mikah had mentioned is available on other on television sets, so you don't need an Apple TV or an iPhone to use it. It's definitely a step in that direction to get people using their services that aren't part of the Apple ecosystem. There's the Apple Arcade, which is coming up. This won't. As far as we know, this isn't going to be available outside of the Apple ecosystem. But if it's successful, I don't see why they wouldn't add that to the list of things that you can actually play on different devices, as long as the developers are able to develop these apps across the platforms. So, yeah, I think on the one hand, that when you're all in on the Apple ecosystem, you are all in on all these things that you can do on your iPhone, iPad, iPod Touch, Mac. But Apple is seeing that they can grow larger revenue by bringing some of those services outside of their iPhone market. But I also think that they want to keep some of those inside, like messages, for example. That's like one of the reasons a lot of people either won't switch to Android or they carry two devices, because messages is such an important asset to them. So, there's some things Apple's going to want to keep in their cage so that they can continue to get those switchers.
Well, and I suppose, too, then all of those people who do have iPhones, Apple can make money off of them where they can't necessarily sell them a new phone. The other category that I wanted to talk to you about is wearables, because we continue to see...
I'm glad you brought it up.
There you go, double-digit growth in that category. I'm curious, given that it seems to be such an important category, do you think we're looking at a future where we see continued improvements for Apple's existing wearables lineup, or are we looking at more products in the wearables category?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. So I think they said that their growth was at 48, they had a 48% growth. So while we're all talking about how the iPhone has dropped by 12% or almost 12%, there's not the same amount of people talking about how wearable revenue has grown to like $5.5 billion. That's a pretty big record.
Yeah,
so what
huge.
we're seeing is that there are a lot of people out there that are not just getting Apple Watch, but they're getting AirPods and they're getting Beats devices in their ears. And this also includes home-related products too, which Apple has HomeKit, but they don't actually make a whole lot of their own actual branded home things like routers, for example. So we might see in the future, especially with HomeKit coming to Wi-Fi routers, we might see Apple open up that market a little bit more for themselves and create some of their own products, their own branded products that fit into all of those categories. In terms of wearables, I think the general culture has decided that it's in watch form. I think we see rings like the Motive Ring is probably the only other place where we regularly see people wearing something like that, but it seems to be on the watch. So looking for a new category of wearable, at least right now, doesn't seem like something Apple would be interested in. It doesn't seem like a viable option, but growing their home products and kind of including that within the wearable growth seems like definitely Apple has a lot of potential to go big with that kind of thing.
How challenging do you think it's going to be for Apple to kind of narrow in and locate new growth opportunities? They're doing a really good job of diversifying right now after a very long amount of time where they were focused on a single product that was really driving so much of their business, be it iPhone. Before that, the iPod was such a huge deal, such a huge driver for attention and dollars. So Apple, I feel like, at least in the 2000s, has been very driven by a single kind of marquee product that does so much for their business. And now we're entering this diversification period. Is this the stage going forward, or do you think Apple's going to be able, at this mature point of its business, come back with a new product that drives as much as these other products have?
Yeah, and that kind of comes back to this fear that we all have that, and I don't want to use the phrase Apple isn't innovating anymore because, clearly they innovate with everything they do, especially with their software. But it does, there's not the same team of people that are dedicated to just brainstorming what the next big thing could be. It's a new group of people that are in here, and we haven't seen what they do yet, other than with Apple Watch and AirPods, which were very successful. Even if they were sort of a slow burn. They were sort of like the late summer find that everybody ended up loving, but it did take a while. So obviously they have from the beginning, they started with just a Mac, and then suddenly they were doing a music device that, either no one had heard of a carryable digital music device, or there weren't very many of them out there. People weren't as excited about it. And then they got into the phone market. Yeah. And then they got into the phone market, and then they got into the wearable market. So absolutely they have the potential to find that next big thing, that next category that we're all going to clamor for. It's a matter of what's this team going to be like, this future team that's, just sitting around throwing out ideas that are, what if we had, bananas that sang to you in the morning,
Love it.
You got to be
Need
that.
it.
Whoa. Bottle that one up. That's it right there.
That's the idea. The next
Yeah,
big thing.
you need it to be that crazy to rein it in and actually come up with good product ideas. And I don't think that Apple, they're thinking about that too. They know that they need to innovate, and they know that they need to have a great team of creative designers who are going to think outside the box and make that happen. Hopefully this will happen before the stagnant sets in and they, have to swim to keep up. But has Apple ever really suffered from that? I don't think they have. I think they've always been on the forefront of this kind of stuff. And even in cases like 5G, where they're a little behind on some of the technology, they see it. They see through the window. They know they need to get there. So I'm fairly certain they have a team of people back there that are, throwing bananas around and seeing if they'll sing to them.
The next big banana.
Speaking of singing bananas, No, that's not a good segue. I just always wanted to say that.
Yep.
I was wondering, so one thing that I've noticed, and I'm sure you've noticed now, is that every time one of the analysts brings up a question about the trade war, what trade war? Is there a trade war? There's a trade war with China. Cook seems to kind of, let's talk about this instead. I feel like this is kind of a given, but is there a strategy behind that? Does Cook not know what's going on, or is there some sort of strategy behind that decision to sort of go around those questions?
So in the quarterly meeting that they just did, if I recall, somebody did bring that question up, and I'm trying to remember his exact wording because I was transcribing it. Off the top of my head, though, if I recall, what he was saying is that it's global, that Apple is global. Oh, okay. So I think I'm in the right area now. So what he says, and I'm going to sort of quote, just skip through some things and summarize, but he says, the vast majority of our products are kind of made everywhere. There's a significant level of content from the United States, a lot from Japan to Korea to China and to the European Union. So basically, there's some huge factories in China that are doing a lot of stuff for Apple, but it sounds to me like from the top level, they might be a little concerned with it, but they know that they have things they can fall back on, and it won't be to the detriment of the company. That we're not going to have this fall, you can't buy an iPhone or you have to spend an extra, $300 on your iPhone because of the issues with the trade war. I think Apple has positioned itself to do what they need to do to make sure that they're not negatively impacted by the situation. And, ideally, they wouldn't have to go outside of the Chinese market to get their manufacturing done, because I know they do that. I think all iPhones right now might be made in China, but they do have other connections outside of that country that they can turn to. So, there might be a little bit of, look, there's something over there, but
Squirrel.
Is it a singing banana?
It might be a little bit of a singing banana and a little bit of, you shouldn't really worry about our issue. We've got it taken care of on the back end.
All right. And then one last question for you here, and that's just because I think these are a little fun. At the end of the call, after Cook apologized for some allergies and stuff, he teased several new products that Apple would be announcing. So we can probably count on iPhone being 2 to 3 of those several new products. What do you think might be another one of those several new products?
Well, I think a 16-inch MacBook Pro is a definite possibility. I think this is like a pipe dream, not a possible reality, but a 4-inch iPhone. I'm really just hoping they'll bring that SE back and they'll just give it a brand new look. I really do. I really love that 4-inch phone. So I would love to see that come back with maybe 0 bezels. I bet they're probably working on some more services that they can bring out. Obviously, like we've been talking about, they realize that services needs to be something that they shore up. So they've probably got some more things in the pipeline that will bring some new services our way, possibly some big group subscriptions instead of, subscribe to Apple News, subscribe to TV Plus, subscribe to iCloud. There will hopefully be some sort of bring it all together under one subscription price. That might be something that we see in the near future.
Well, my fingers are crossed that you get your 4-inch phone. Lory Gil, thank you so much for joining us. And where can people follow you online?
They can find me at Appaholic on Twitter. That's APPAHOLIK, and at Lory Gil at most of the other social things. And of course, I'm writing all the time on iMore. So visit us there anytime you want to say hi.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Lory.
Thanks for having me.
We'll talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
All right. The war on paywalls is on.
Oh.
Dun, dun, dun. So I'll set up the stage here a little bit if you weren't aware. Many online publications, I'm sure you've noticed, they lock their content behind a paywall. It's not new or anything. But often you see that they grant visitors a limited number of free articles per month, usually 1 to 3 or whatever. And you see it ticking down every time you hit their article. You're like, oh no, I'm one step closer to no more free articles. When a visitor exhausts those trial articles, of course, they're encouraged to pay in order to gain full access. Well, somewhere along the line, people began to notice that by using incognito mode on the Chrome browser, those sites couldn't keep track of the number of times they'd visited, thereby, allowing them to enjoy an unlimited number of free trial articles. Of course, that didn't last forever. The sites started to realize that they could track incognito visitors without the use of cookies, by recognizing when a user's file system API had been disabled, something that incognito mode does actually to protect from files being stored on the hard drive, to basically make sure that you aren't leaving a trace behind. So it's meant to kind of ensure privacy. At the same time, it's like triggering this flag that you are in fact in incognito mode. Maybe you don't want
cheating.
that. Yes, exactly. So that meant people could no longer get a free pass when they were using incognito mode. These sites started recognizing that. And now Google just released, I just got it on my laptop at home, Chrome 76, which updates the browser to include a fix to this loophole. So people who want to freeload off of paid content sites, once again, they have the ability to do this thanks to an update of on Google's side with Chrome. Google, of course, says they're doing this not for people to get around paywalls, but to harden the security of incognito. Do you believe Google?
See, okay, I do believe Google in this sense, because I don't think that the goal here, I don't see what Google wins by keeping people from being able to do that. And so if they've figured out that there is a way to kind of track a user in incognito mode, the whole point of incognito mode is to make you incognito.
Yeah.
So they found a new way to limit that. That said, coming from a journalistic background and making my living through, the paywalls and things like that, I'm sorry. This does kind of make me feel a little awkward because there's it's like 3/4 of Mikah and 1/4 of Mikah. And the 1/4 of Mikah has the hat on and is like extra. But the 3/4 is like, I want a free web where I can browse however I want to.
Yeah.
And so he's kind of winning out and is okay with the fact that Chrome has figured out a fix for this, because we should be able to be private online and not have any sort of identification. So I feel that this is a good move, but I also feel for those folks that are like, well, let's try to figure out the next way to do it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of scary too, because then that encourages even deeper ways of tracking people, right?
What other ways are hidden in that incognito mode of identifying whether a person is in fact in incognito?
They're going to learn our typing. Every typing method is as unique as a fingerprint.
Right.
And then I don't know. That's kind of scary. Or scrolling, I guess, would be the thing.
Yeah. Well, it might end up pushing paywall sites to maybe reduce the number of free articles, although that's still not going to do anything about the incognito mode thing. It might actually push sites to stop offering free articles, right?
Altogether, yeah.
Because if there's always a way around it, and their desire is to get people to actually pay for the content. But that's just a catch-22 for the publishers, because then the people that visit never get to see anything to make an informed decision.
Like it's
really a catch-22, it feels like.
So what is the stronger version of a paywall? If a paywall is the thing that you get to read, what happens when they remove those? What do we call that? Is that like a pay building, a pay box? You just have to pay completely to be able to get access to the content.
I don't know, like a pay steel barrier.
That's probably something. A pay force
steel
field.
Wall. There are some other changes that aren't quite as I don't know, strange to talk about, that make a little more sense, from a basic perspective. Things like, I guess, escape when you're visiting a site with a lot of pop-ups. If you've ever noticed, you try and hit escape and that just triggers another pop-up. You're like, I just want out of this hole, and you can't get out of there because you're hitting escape and it's not working. Apparently they fixed that in this version of Chrome.
I didn't know that was a thing. That sounds horrifying.
I feel like I don't know the last time I've gotten caught in a site that has never-ending pop-ups, but I feel like I've been caught in there before, and the only thing that worked was like a force quit. And I'm sure I hit escape thinking that was going to work. It probably did not. Also, support for sites with dark mode themes, because dark mode is all the rage. So if your site supports it, I guess Chrome supports that better for like an automatic switch, that sort of thing. And then also requiring users to explicitly activate Flash every time they visit a site,
Nice.
instead of setting a preference to load Flash, which you used to be able to do. And that's, of course, ties into Google's, basically their drive to get rid of Flash entirely.
Something tells me that the same site where you have to activate Flash is the site where you have to hit escape a billion times to get out of those pop-ups.
Probably, there's a lot of overlap there, I'm sure.
Yeah, so maybe just avoid those altogether is the next Chrome feature they'll come up with.
That's a quick tip.
Yes, just don't go there. Don't go there, friends.
All right, you got the next story. Story of the week, by the way.
All right, so as these things often do, it started as a joke tweet fired off on Twitter. It goes like this. I don't like use soap on my whole body when I shower, and I don't think I'm gross. I pretty much just wash my face and my armpits with soap, and I shower like once or twice a week, lol. I think it's fine. But it has since turned into a conversation surrounding class, race, hygiene, and how these things intersect. After sending off the tweet, Sophie Weiner received a number of horrified responses and later claimed it was classist to be horrified by someone not washing their legs. Nicole Froyo has since put together an excellent breakdown of how hygiene does and does not intersect with class and race. So I kind of wanted to talk about this a little bit because I remember this tweet getting fired off, and I was one of those people who was like, oh my gosh, you don't wash your legs? And it's this idea that, oh no, the soap just runs down and then my legs are clean.
I remember this. This was like a couple of months ago.
So let's start here. Jason.
Uh-oh.
Do you wash your legs in the shower?
Welcome to the show, Mikah. Welcome to Tech News Weekly, where we get right to the details. Yeah, I wash my legs.
Thank God. All right, we can do this. We can continue to be co-hosts. I remember going to like all of my friends and family, like I didn't know it was a thing where you don't wash your legs in the shower, but apparently it happens, and I had to lose a few family and friends. No. But this conversation became a little bit more than that because of the idea that, after this gal, put out this tweet, and then she was feeling a little bit attacked, as one often does on social media.
Oh, geez, no kidding.
Then she had basically said, well, this is just classist because there are some people who don't have access to soap and water and things like that. But Nicole or Froyo kind of broke it down a little bit more. And one of the things that, is brought up in this article, not washing your legs or not taking a shower every day is not class rebellion, but a display of which bodies are allowed to be unwashed without stigma attached. I think about that a lot, and I think about all the young folks around the United States who are young folks of color who have natural hair, who have had to cut their hair for whatever reason because it's considered dirty or unclean. And so this conversation kind of became an idea of like, there's a bit of privilege to check there with the idea that just because you choose not to wash your body and you do have that choice and that opportunity available, that's a whole different thing from deciding that this is a classist statement. So it can get a little complicated, but I do like it when sometimes social media can come full circle and we can have like a real discussion about something.
Right.
And I think that that's kind of where this started, funny haha, to whoa, let's kind of examine where this is going. And that's why this, as it's called, the hygiene culture wars that started on social media kind of stuck out to me. And you had a few things that you liked in the article, right?
Well, I think what I find interesting about this is kind of similar to what you're saying, how the amplification that happens on social media can take something that seems so innocuous and like a throwaway comment of like, oh, I'm just going to, just throw out some complaint about people who don't wash their legs. How that can turn from this innocuous comment into a wider discussion about a whole lot of very weighty, heavy things like race and culture and poverty and this wide discussion. The Medium piece is very like fascinating.
Yes.
I wasn't sure. Like in the beginning, it was kind of like I was telling myself like, well, I learned here that people have different ideas of what it means to wash yourself. Is it pouring water on you? Is it using cleaning products? Is it just simply being in a pool of water? Like at one point they're like, jump in a swimming pool, and I consider that a wash. And personally, I wouldn't consider that a wash, but I'm not judging you for it.
Yeah.
So hey, everybody has a different. But then as you read through the piece, you realize this is just a much wider statement and view that I just never considered before, right? That there are people in this world who would give anything to be able to have the privilege to wash themselves, yet they can't. And that is something that I, as a white American male, have taken for granted. And that's something to, like you said, check your privilege. Understand that not everybody else is in the same situation. So making a blanket statement doesn't always land with in the place you think it's going to.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and ultimately, I still think that there's plenty of room to have fun and be funny and say silly things on Twitter. And I think that that's all that this would have been. But it was the follow-up tweet to claim classism that sort of resulted in the discussion that this piece kind of breaks into.
Yeah.
So I gladly would love to hear about whether you choose to wash your legs in the shower. Maybe I kind of take
don't
back
open
what
that
I
door,
just
Mikah.
said. Yeah.
They will take you up on it.
As I was saying it, I knew it was wrong. And so I'm going now. No.
But yet you said it at TNW at twit.tv, by the way, if you want to let us know if you wash your legs in the shower.
Give us your shower thoughts on TNW.
That's right. Interesting article, though. I had not run across it, so I'm happy you pointed it. I remember when this was happening a couple of months ago on Twitter, and it was just this kind of, it probably just shows up in the moments, area of Twitter as like, oh, here's a meme that everybody's throwing around, and it turns into a much wider discussion. That's not a bad thing.
And I got to give a quick shout out because how I found out about this article, Megan Maroney.
Oh, who? Megan Maroney? We should get her as a guest one of these days on this show.
She should be a guest on the show, yeah.
We miss you, Megan.
We love you.
All right, so that is it. Great first episode, man. Thank you. I'm so psyched to have you on this show.
Yeah, it's been fun.
It's great to have you here. Tech News Weekly records live every Thursday starting at 11 a.m. Pacific. By going to twit.tv/live. You can watch us record that live. You can also be part of the show, like I said, by emailing us, tnw@twit.tv. You don't have to only tell us about whether you wash your legs or not. Other insight welcome.
Yes, please. Any other insight welcome. You can also subscribe to our show at twit.tv/TNW. That stands for Tech News Weekly. Follow us on the social media accounts. That's Twitter, Instagram, and all the others. And if you want to tweet at me, I'm at Mikah Sargent.
Right on. And I'm at Jason Howell. Thanks to everyone who helps us do the show each and every week. John, Jeff, John, and Burke. And thanks to you for watching. We'll see you next time on Tech News Weekly. We're going to try this out for the first time. We'll see you next time. Bye. Oh, what are we doing?
I want to do a high five. That's
Okay.
what you do. He wants me to do something else.
John wants us to fist bump.
But you're a high fiver.
I don't care.